The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster Mike, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Open line through till 1 today, so the floor is yours. Can you believe it's the 2nd of September? It's that time of year, of course. Once bank holiday is gone, when the big question is asked right across the Isle of Man. The all-important question that's asked between friends and family about this time of year. And you know what the question is? What are you doing for Christmas? Where are we going for Christmas dinner? Who's cooking Christmas dinner? Who's going to whose house? What is it going to be? Is it going to be ham turkey? Is it going to be vegan, vegetarian? What's it going to be? Have you sorted Christmas out yet? It has to be sorted out by the end of this week, or we go into full-blown panic. The Isle of Man government says it's got no plans right now to recommend or to introduce new rules regarding smoking outdoors. Public Health is aware of the discussion in the UK regarding changes that the Labour government could be planning to make. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has vowed to do more to reduce smoking, with reports suggesting his administration could ban it in many spaces, including pub gardens and playgrounds. A survey by YouGov has found the vast majority of people back the proposals. How do you feel? We're not going to pretend that cigarettes are full of vitamins. However, it isn't illegal to smoke currently. And lots of hospitality venues do have smoking areas outside. You only have to drive along the promenade anywhere, really. Certainly drive along Douglas Promenade, and you will see a half a dozen outside places where people can smoke if they wish to. What are your thoughts on this? Text, email, call and WhatsApp. And Julian's with us first today. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Lovely day, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, what a fantastic weather, isn't it?
Well, talk about smoking outside. Speaking of which, the local news this morning on the article about stopping outdoor smoking.
Yeah.
And Andy Gibbs of Jack's comment about how it would be devastating to the hospitality industry. How would it be policed? And is it becoming too much of a nanny state?
I can't see. I mean, if it's going to be illegal to smoke outside or in public spaces, who's going to, if you like, issue the arrest? Who's going to turn up? Will there be citizens' arrests, or what's going to happen?
Well, I'm exactly coming to that, and you might be interested in what I'm going to say. Just briefly, somebody else calling out the nanny state in the UK is Isabel Vaughan Spruce, who was arrested twice for silently praying across the road from an abortion clinic in Birmingham. She was arrested under the recently introduced UK Public Order Act of 2023. And Isabel had fallen foul of a 150-metre buffer zone around the clinic brought in using a Public Spaces Protection Order. She fought it. The judge agreed that her right of freedom of expression had been infringed, and she was awarded £13,000 compensation from West Midlands Police. She said afterwards that the new act is a busybody charter which attempts to bring in thought crime and stamps on people's freedom of speech and expression, which brings me on to my point. A new private members bill promoted by MHK Michelle Hayward. The title of the proposed bill is Safe Access Zones and Protected Public Places Bill 2024. I'll just say that one more time. Safe Access Zones and Protected Public Places Bill 2024. This bill seeks to allow the Isle of Man Department of Health and Social Care, headed up by Chief Officer Paul Richardson, and allows unprecedented powers to place restricted access zones around premises, including healthcare settings, in relation to medical research, innovative medical treatments, scientific research, vaccination and inoculation services, and perhaps most importantly, any other activity prescribed by the department. these safe access zones that are mentioned in this new bill would prohibit members of the public trying to influence, advise, or persuade someone from making use of these services, either by graphic, physical, verbal, or written means. And doing so could result, and I'm quoting straight from the bill here, a 6-month prison sentence and a fine level 4 fine for the first offence, and up to 12 months and an even bigger level 5 fine for a second offence. The bill states that the safe access zone can be within 100 metres of any part of the protected premises, but the distance can be extended with no upper limit. The safe access zone can remain in place for up to 3 years, but can be extended for an unlimited time.
So what do you think this is meant to do? What do you think the purpose of this bill is?
Well, it's interesting that all of a sudden there are plans afoot, it seems, to limit access to places. And, this also begs the question, how do you know if you're in the hospital and you happen to go across one of these zones and perhaps you're wearing the wrong T-shirt or something that says something that may not be in keeping with what that particular zone is doing. And especially that it says within the bill that DHSC must maintain the anonymity of any protected premises, which kind of begs the question, how would anyone know how to act if the premises is anonymous and if the perimeter doesn't have any signage? The bill also states that the definition of a premises is either an NHS hospital or any other premises. So a premises normally is something like a building or a temporary structure like a tent or even a vehicle, and it could be anywhere on the island.
It sounds like this is what we say it is, when we say it is, and where we say it is. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, well, just download the bill and have a look. I mean, some questions that come to mind, and there's lots of questions, and I'm not going to stay on too long because you could go on for ages because it's like 16 pages long, this thing. What is the compelling evidence to bring what looks to be a completely disproportionate bill in when we already have laws like the Public Order Act already, we've got the Harassment Act, and we've got data protection because it also mentions that nobody can be filmed in these areas.
Is this a cut and paste job from a UK Parliamentary Act, do you think?
Well, it does seem to have a lot of those hallmarks. It also says that if anyone disagrees with an imposition of one of these access zones, the only route is to go through the courts, which not only makes it expensive and time-consuming, but if you lose, presumably, you'd have to pay government costs too on top of that. So you're kind of chilling the idea that anybody might want to take exceptions to this. And also, you've got very vague language. For example, one of the sentences is, interfering with a protected person directly or indirectly, with intent or recklessly. I mean, those terms means you can literally criminalise anybody.
Well, I mean, in words of one syllable, what do you think this is meant? What do you think this is meant to stop?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it seems that if you look at it in terms of the places, I mean, vaccination and inoculation treatments. It also says about innovative medical treatments, and it defines that as a medical treatment for a condition that involves a departure from the existing range of accepted medical treatments for the condition for the purposes of medical research. It also mentions about animal research, and it quotes the Animal Rights Act. It just makes you wonder, though. I mean, for example, let's suppose it was in today, and let's suppose, I don't know, Chester Street Vaccination Hub was open, and that had an access zone around it. If somebody was to wear a T-shirt that, say, talks about the recent news, and anyone can look it up, if anyone looks up 5 US states whose Pfizer, that would then show to people that Texas, Utah, Kansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana are suing Pfizer for concealing serious side effects during their trials of the mRNA jab, and also misleading claims about the drug's efficacy, quoting only the relative risk reduction and not the much more important absolute risk reduction. Okay. If you happened to walk down the stairs and you were within that 100 yards or whatever they choose, and somebody read that T-shirt, you could inadvertently be up to 6 months in prison and a level 4 fine, couldn't you?
And this is safe access zones what is it? Protected Public Spaces Bill 2024.
Yeah, Safe Access Zones and Protected Public Places Bill 2024. So, this is kind of, it just seems to be the creep of more and more draconian oversight of everything that I don't know, you've got these hate speech laws touted, you've got this, and who's to say? I mean, they say in the UK that it's smoke-free zone. So they could be used, to put access zones around pub gardens, but it could also equally apply to wood burners, couldn't it? If you're saying smoke instead of smoking, who's to say that they can't put a zone around a housing estate and say, right, nobody's allowed a wood burner anymore?
Okay.
You're almost doing Emergency Powers Act without needing the emergency power.
Okay. Let me read you something that's just been sent in, Julian, if I may. It's from a lady called Sue, and she said, I believe the bill that Julian's talking about is there to protect vulnerable people from being harassed by zealots trying to force their beliefs on others and poke their noses into other people's business. Is this true?
Okay, so if we've got a much, much tighter control of our rights of expression, how many people have been doing this? I mean, can we have how many is it? I mean, this is something really, really big.
Yeah.
What are the parameters that require all this new draconian tightening up of our rights? Because, what is that? I mean, I'd really like that person to actually say exactly who this is, how many there are. I mean, I'm not seeing this plastered all over the newspapers every day. And this is a massive imposition on everyone over here.
Well, as you say, it seems fairly open-ended, and when things are open to interpretation, of course, when they're not down in statute and they are open to interpretation, the point is, who interprets? Who's the person who does that? Who makes the decision?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think just to finish, Michelle Hayward was heard to say in Tynwald when she was asked about this, I think she started off with, you're all aware, but she never actually said, you're all aware of what? So perhaps Michelle Hayward would like to clarify from that recording that's on the tynwald.org website, what is this you're all aware of thing that would validate bringing in such a draconian bill?
Okay. All right, Julian, we appreciate that. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Good to hear from you. Keeping with the spirit of transparency, I know we haven't heard how much repairs are costing at Heysham and the coaches that are being used and the buses. How much is it costing the steam packet company, i.e. us, at Heysham? We don't know at the moment. Has anybody used the bus yet at Heysham? Here's a note in from Stuart who said, I remember those old, I can't say knackered, Stuart, but the old buses they used to use when we used to go to it was on the Wirral, wasn't it? When we used to go into the Wirral, when the Ben McCree used to go there, was it 12 Keys, and they used to then bus you round to the centre of Liverpool, and Stuart said those buses were not in the first flush of youth. So one of the buses they're using at Heysham now, we've got a brand new boat. Are we using a brand new bus to nip around Heysham? Vaping indoors should be banned and a high priority before outdoor smoking in public places. Stop vaping indoors before you muck around with outdoor smoking. How do you feel about this? I mean, do you go to pubs, clubs, restaurants, cafes where you can't smoke inside, but people sit outside and smoke? How do you feel about that? And do you think that, I mean, this is not happening, it's not said it's going to happen here, but the UK are talking about it, basically criminalising people who smoke in what are currently outdoor smoking zones, that is pub gardens and those shelters they put up outside places. I don't know whether you've seen. There are a couple of big ones outside the Palace Hotel, one outside the Cash Bingo, there's one outside the restaurant as well. Those, if this were to be introduced, would have to go, and there will be no smoking. People may smoke as much as they want to, but not in my presence, says David H. Is that indoors or outdoors? And Bob on 378 said, I've got no sympathy for the hospitality sector. When you're in business, you take risks. You have to move with the market and update what you have to offer. If they can't do it, not my problem, says Bob. Here's a note in, just said, I won't call Keir Starmer Sir. Gary, you don't have to. I'll call him lots of other names, but not Sir or anyone else. People shouldn't put up with these laws as to where it's going to end. Don't accept new laws that they're trying to bring in, as it will be the downfall of your freedoms, says Gary in Ramsey. And Juan's on now. Hi, Juan.
How are you, Andy? It's nice weather for ducks today.
Isn't it lovely?
It is now. Then you've been off on holiday again. You've not been taking any more of them little boosters, have you? And got that cough back?
Oh, you never know. I don't know. Saturday was a gorgeous day, wasn't it? Not a cloud in the sky.
No, it was a gorgeous day. The Chief Minister must have found enough money so we didn't have any chemtrails on that day, eh? What a good one that was. I haven't spoke to you since the agricultural show. We've been missing each other since then, but I'm sure the first question on everyone's mind will be, did Ewan get his Mannin Line tea towel? And
did you get your Mannin Line tea towel?
I've got to tell the listeners, I was left wanting. I don't know. Mrs. Wint has still got them tied up, hasn't she?
Oh well, I'll see if we can. I'll see if we can find. I think there's one at the bottom of the budgie's cage. So we'll wash it out, and you can have that one.
Mine's Fredbear, Andy. It's Fredbear. Just moving on to some more topical stuff here. What Julian was talking about there, and yes, when you look at this bill and the legalese that's in this, I wonder. I mean, when these private members' bills come through, and we've had now 3 very important issues brought through on private members' bills: assisted dying, bishops' votes, and now this has been brought through. Have they found some mechanism of avoiding certain procedures to get this through, Timble? Is it easier to get it through on private members' bills?
Well, they certainly never mentioned them when they put their manifestos forward to get into the House of Keys. But obviously, I mean, there's not that much legislation knocking around in this Keys at the moment, in this Tynwald.
And I'm sure with Michelle Hayward's doctorate, I'm sure she's a very capable person, but I don't think she's capable of writing this up. So I'm sure that obviously our AG's office has been squirreling away at this legislation. And as Jane Peel-Wilson said last week, when she avoided Julian's question about the hate crime speeches, etc., they've got a lot more stuff that they're doing at the moment. So is this part of it, or again, is it handed down from the UK, like you've just said? Is it being handed down? Again, would tie in with what Phil Gorn said the other week when I was talking to him about we only have certain things we can do over here, and the rest of the stuff is handed down to us from the UK. So it is very concerning when you see this stuff going through, and I'm sure a lot of people won't be interested in reading this article or this amendment, but it is concerning where this is heading with hate crime speeches and these bills. Are they saying now that there's going to be certain areas of the island that the people of the island can't go to and can't access? Is that what this is saying?
Well, it just seems open to interpretation, and presumably, if we can get hold of Michelle Hayward, if we can have it in words of one syllable, what it is. You see, with most things, you know what you're trying to do. Assisted dying, offer legalised assisted dying. The bishop's vote is to prevent the bishop from having a vote. So here, it's kind of a safe access zone, protect of public spaces bill. What exactly is it trying to stop?
Yeah, exactly that point. And again, going on to touch on what Julian said there, it's going to be very hard afterwards, the way that this is written in, that you would have to go through petition of dolience and such like to do anything about this, which again makes it very hard once these bills are in. And it seems to me very concerning with what's happening, again, looking at what's happening in Canada now and what's happening in the UK. There's very much tightening up of our freedom of expression and our freedom of speech. And just touching on that little message you got in from Sue, that what she's talking about there, everyone mentions these words zealots now, conspiracy theorists, zealots, narcissists, seems to be the big key words that they find, which is given to them from the mainstream media when they're trying to, diss people down. But whatever happened to having an expression of opinion and freedom of speech and freedom of expression? If you didn't like what people said, you just turn the television off, turn the radio off, go on a different channel, or don't listen to them. Whatever happened to that freedom that we had? It seems to be people now are just upset about the slightest little thing that anyone says that doesn't agree with their opinion.
And I got a message in from Graham who said, also, I think we need to, and I'm thinking, I'll throw this one out, tell me what you think of it. Graham said we need to also understand the difference between mischief and malice. I.e., you can be a bit mischievous, but that isn't necessarily malicious. And he reckons that this sort of bill could, you could, if somebody is just playing the Aunt Nance, if you like, if somebody is just having a bit of a giggle or being a bit mischievous, that could be perceived as being malicious and consequently against the law.
Yeah, is that as mischievous as putting an international runway down at Derby? Or it just bemuses me, because at the moment, Andy, I've said this before, we're living in strange times, but nothing makes sense. There's nothing adds up with anything that's going on at the moment. And someone somewhere knows what's happening or where they want this to go. Unfortunately, we're not privy to that information. But nothing is logical and nothing makes sense. Everywhere you look, and we're talking about closing down freedom of speech on Facebook and all that. If the news was honest and actually newsworthy, people wouldn't be going hunting for other things, but it's not anymore. And that's the problem. You're finding more factual stuff out, in among all the rubbish, might I say, that's on the internet. But there's a massive load of factual stuff there that just cannot be denied. And that's not getting reported on. And I think that's what annoys people, is where we are. And we are getting into a very dystopian world at the moment. And like I've said before, the Isle of Man doesn't have to go down this route. At the moment, it looks like we have one day of democracy every 5 years, and that's the day we vote these people in. And after that, the civil servants seem to be taking over. And that's the worrying thing, I think, where we are. And I've said this before. We don't have to go down this route on this island, but unfortunately, the people who are in there are taking us down this route, and we must be mindful of that.
OK, thanks, Stuart.
Take care, Andy.
It's 29 minutes past 12. If a smoking ban comes into place outside pubs, says Pat, the boss of Jack's was on this morning saying he had a seating area outside on the pavement. He doesn't own the pavements outside Jack's or the Barbary Coast. They're public pavements, so he can't police it. Well, he must have planning permission to put seats there. But anyway, I see your point. If security bouncers tried to police it and stopped a person from smoking while crossing the pavements, they could be breaking the law. John in Onken said, no point in extending the smoking ban as the existing rules aren't enforced anyway, as can be seen by the groups who congregate in pub doorways to smoke. And vaping indoors should be banned. That texter again, vaping indoors should be banned, a much higher priority before outdoor smoking. What do you think about this? Keeping with, do they think it's time to ban dogs from Strand Street other than guide dogs and assistance dogs, says Texter 470. What have you seen happening with dogs in Strand Street?
Oh, it's certainly getting chilly. I do wish they would get the fire lit.
Well, good luck. They've forgotten to stock up on logs again.
Again? Well, don't they know how cold it is lolling around on the floor?
Well, I have been telling them about Cozy Firewood IOM. They have ready-to-burn kiln-dried hardwood logs in everything from 30-litre single bags to bulk crates, and all ready for delivery.
Well, what did they say?
Nothing, as usual. It's like they just can't understand me sometimes.
Oh, humans. Keep your pets warm with Cozy Firewood. Search Cozy Firewood IOM on Facebook for your firewood quote today.
Whatever your business, whatever its size, you can always rely on the island's leading fuel and oil supplier to keep you moving. Ellen Vannin Fuels, powering the island and powering industry. Call us on 844 000.
The Ramsey Garden Centre sale is now on, featuring a huge range of garden items at vastly reduced prices. Don't delay. Grab a garden bargain now. There has never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre. Open 7 days a week on Albert Road, Ramsey.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows letting rain, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows.
Coming up, we have another winning weekend here on Manx Radio. And this time we've teamed up with Miller Chaps to give you the chance to win a £200 voucher to spend in store. All you have to do is listen out for our winning question, which we'll ask on air right across the weekend. And once you've heard it, text your answer to 166 177. Miller Chaps offer everything for your home with over 40 top brands. They've also expanded their stressless and temper collections, perfect for upgrading your space before winter. You'll find them in Parliament Street in Ramsey. Make this your winning weekend with Miller Chaps and your nation station, Manx Radio.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Got a message in. The mountain road's closed from the hairpin to the Craig because of an oil spill, so please be aware of that. Mountain road closed from the hairpin to the Craig because of an oil spill. All I can say is this is control, says Jeff. It's what the government's doing. We better build more prisons. Safe spaces are absolutely needed, says 653. They're there to protect people who may be in a vulnerable position. Stop scaremongering where there isn't an issue. And Will says these are Orwellian times. The meters, Manx Utilities, said they don't have any public liability insurance. This is a mess and we need to wake up. People who don't go and won't go to pubs, whether they're smoke-free or not, should get to make the rules for the adults that do, says Texter 109. And Alan said, look, the Isle of Mans are washed with illegal drugs and they want to criminalise smoking, which is legal. They bury their heads in the sand. And much on the same notion, Sam just said, yes, this is the absolutely easy option. We've got drugs here, there and everywhere, and they want to ban smoking, legal smoking, which the government makes a fortune from in tobacco duty and VAT, says Sam. And Bonzo's on now. Hi, Bonzo.
Hello, yes. Well, we're now officially in autumn, did you know?
Meteorological autumn, yes.
That's right, yes. And, yeah, isn't it autumnal? It started right on the day, hasn't it? So the rains, I think, will be set in for the next 6 months at least. Oh, by the way, Mannin Line tea towels. Do you want to qualify for one yet?
Oh, Bonzo, I would have thought you'd be first in the queue. If you want a Mannin Line tea towel, we'll sort one out for you.
Oh, super, brilliant. I can wash my dishes now. Yeah. Anyway, going to June and Julian's perhaps predictable looking at things through the wrong end of the telescope, as per usual. That somehow Michelle Hayward's private member's bill is the start of a police state with thought crime, blah, 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 blah. No. Firstly, Tynwald members can bring private members' bills if they want to. That's part of the process. So if they've got an idea for a bill, a piece of legislation that they've some subject that they're very interested in, think that needs regulation around it, so they can then bring a private member's bill. And if Tynwald says that it's got enough time to consider it, then that goes forward and members can discuss it and amend it and pass it or reject it as they wish.
But I mean, what would you think about members of the public who would say, look, we're in a cost of living crisis, we haven't got enough houses, we've got an over-budget Liverpool landing stage, there are other problems on the Isle of Man. Why is a Safe Spaces bill taking up parliamentary time and money?
Well, because things to do with cost of living, etc., I mean, those are part and parcel of COMIN and government policy, and those bills aren't ready yet because of well, you could say, A, because they've been planning a long time to to make sure that they're okay and fit for purpose when they put them before Tim for consideration, or B, that they just haven't worked it out yet, and they've just been fannying around producing lots of various visions and strategies with lots of colour pictures of people pointing at things. Yeah, but I mean, Timwell can only consider legislation that's brought to it, and if government isn't addressing all those other things which, we all think they should be addressing, then there's space in the programme for people to put in private members' bills, which might seem to be what's that doing there? It's a bit on the edge of it. But this, as I recall, would be, I think, sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the safe space provisions of the Abortion Reform Act.
Okay.
So that's what it would be, and obviously looking at the bill, there's a lot of belt and braces about it, and I'm sure that would be amended, in its causes and other stages. So there's plenty of scope to actually have safeguards about this. Being somehow, thin end of the wedge to some sort of Orwellian nightmare. I don't think that's the intent of anybody for it. But in order to cover all the bases of, is somebody harassing someone, is somebody being nasty about it and intimidating them, that's kind of very broad thing. So,
but don't we have enough laws for that? Don't we have enough laws for that?
Well, I suppose the consideration is that, there's, of course, bits in the Abortion Reform Act for safe spaces, but it might not be big enough or encompassing enough to guarantee that the safety of that space. So, maybe they're going for a more, or Michelle Hayward is thinking that there should be a more belt and braces approach on that. And also if, medical research comes to the island as well.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Bonzo.
Okay, then, cheers. Bye.
Good to hear from you. And Peter's with us now on Mannin Line. Hi, Peter.
Oh, good morning. It's Peter Murcott here, and I'm going to talk about safe spaces. I've got the bill in front of me, and I've listened to some of the interesting comments that have been made so far. Before I just make a little comment on that, there's far too much to talk about because it really is a very long bill, and it's full of a number of areas which are a matter of deep concern. I personally think it's impossible to amend it to make it acceptable. The first point I would just make is you had somebody wrote in and said, the purpose of this bill, or one of the things of this bill, is to stop people being harassed or, interfered with in that sort of way. Yeah. Well, there's already laws that do that. We've got the Public Order Act 1998, which I've recently revised my knowledge of because I used to teach English law, not Manx, but it's very similar to the English law. We've got the Prevention of Harassment, or I think they may call it Protection from Harassment Act. Well, this bill talks about harassment. Well, we've already got a law on harassment. And we've already got a law on using language, speech that will be insulting or something which will cause alarm or distress. We've got all that. The first thing that you need to do in law, and I've been petitioning the Tynwald for years on this, before you introduce any new legislation that's going to result in criminal penalties, especially with prison, you've got to establish that there is a social ill, something serious that is going on, which the existing law has been demonstrated as being unable to contain. Now, I'm not aware that they've gone through that process, because if they're talking about harassment and alarm and distress, that's already covered. So if that sort of thing is going on, my first question would be, well, why hasn't the existing law been applied? The second thing is, as I think has already been alluded to, when they impose these so-called safe access zones, or you might call them censorship zones, because that's what they amount to. They don't seem to have to give any. I've been studying very closely the procedure for actually imposing a zone, and I can't find anything in the bill that says that you have to justify why you do it. They have a long section on the applications, but the person who's applying for it, or if the department's applying, it just simply says they've got to say where the premises are, what services they're wanting to protect, the scope of the zone, well, that's not the reason, and a plan to be added to it. That and then they can suggest what form the publication or order can take and all that sort of thing. But there's nothing that requires someone to give a justification of why they are asking for one of these zones in the first place. And there's something even worse, that although the zone can go for 100 metres, there's nothing to stop it going through for more than 100 metres, and there's no limit placed on how far it can go. Now, when you have a look at all these zones, or the places that could potentially be covered by them, because it isn't just a hospital, it could be a place where there's counselling, where there is advice, where there's even the distribution of information. Very, very quickly, as I see it, if you're not careful, you close the whole island down. In fact, potentially, under this, theoretically, you could close the whole island down. But I come back to this point, that there is existing law which will cover the issues that this bill is proposing to address, but it does have some very strange things. For example, if a person, there's a definition of what it means to interfere with a person. To interfere with a person, you can if you seek to influence someone. Now, that's very vague. I mean, people are always trying to influence you. And the other thing is the disposition that you have to have. That's what we call in law the mens rea, or the necessary state of mind. You can do that in four ways. You either do it intentionally or recklessly, and you either do it directly or indirectly. So potentially under this bill, you could have a person who recklessly, indirectly, seeks to influence someone. Now, I can't get my head round how on earth you would do that without, in actual fact, silencing everyone.
Well, Peter, I mean, I've been trying to figure this out in my mind. What on earth is the possible motivation for this? You know, are we so short of legislation to deal with what currently happens that we need to bolster our legislation, or is this just looking for trouble?
Well, yes, Andy, I've already alluded to that. The answer is that there hasn't been a preliminary investigation, as far as I know, in why the legislation we have harassment. Now, that law in itself is worded quite loosely, and some of the wording actually does concern me, the same as with the Public Order Act when it talks about insulting. The word insulting is very, very difficult to apply in law, so much so that they used to have it in England, and they found it such a problematic piece of law that in the end they took it out, but they haven't taken it out in the Isle of Man, because you had cases that went to the courts on insulting to try and find out what the word meant, and some of those cases went all the way to the House of Lords, and it caused such a problem that in the end they decided that the existing law that they'd got more than adequately covered without having to over-egg the pudding, so to speak. But we've already got this troublesome word insulting, we've got alarm, we've got distress, we've got harassment, which is not easy to define what it is. So they haven't, to my mind, as a preliminary point, which comes back to where I start, they haven't exactly identified and established that the existing law is inadequate to meet a situation such as, I'm not entirely completely sure what they're referring to, but the very fact that they're repeating those words in this legislation, along with some other very vague words, like, as I've said, influencing. I mean, am I trying to influence the public onto my opinion? And why shouldn't I?
And not only that, but these are subjective terms. And not only that, but freedom of expression is central to our civilization. Being able to express your opinion, even if it's objectionable to other people, is the basis of how we conduct our lives.
Well, this is my final point, Andy. We have Articles 9 and 10, particularly of the Human Rights Act. Whenever the law is introduced, it says, in the opinion of the mover, this complies with the Human Rights Act. I don't see how it can possibly apply to the Human Rights Act. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just revise my knowledge about some of the cases that have come before the European Court. I know there have been a number, and when I've read them in the past, I've noticed that when you're talking about freedom of expression, although you can limit freedom of expression, the Human Rights Court wants a jolly good reason, and I don't think they would have it here.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
13 minutes before 1. This is the Safe Access Zone Protected Public Places Bill 2024 being moved as a private member's bill by Michelle Haywood, MHK. The bill that Julian mentions, says Steve, is to prevent people screaming abuse at women attending abortion clinics or stalkers abusing medical professionals, as we've seen on the Isle of Man. No surprise to hear that some people are against it as well. If you look at the disgusting hate speech that's all over Twitter these days, that should explain why free speech shouldn't mean freedom of consequences from stirring up hate and violence, as happened in the UK recently. Thank you, Steve. I mean, just 2 points to make. We're not in the UK, we're the Isle of Man, and we don't have some of the issues and problems that the UK does, so why should we copy the UK? Secondly, social media is different. Remember, when you're talking about when you're doing something in the street, we have laws that cover that. We have the harassment law. So the public order law is there. And remember, these terms are subjective, as Peter said. Some people would say anybody who attempts to influence them is bullying them. It's a subjective term. If people are trying to change your opinion by lobbying you, and if you're in a position of authority, is that bullying or is it just attempting to influence? And who draws the line, and when do they draw it? And if that line can be drawn by one person, can it be changed in 5 years, 10 years' time by another person just because they have the ability to change it? See what I mean? Something subjective becomes objective and can go into law. What do we say? Text, email, call, WhatsApp. And also, I was almost run over by a dog in Strand Street on Saturday, says Nick. Well, a dog on a bicycle, you never know. That's down to Douglas Council. Still seeing people cycling all around Douglas, all on the pavements. Presumably they have a bylaws officer, but it's happening here, there and everywhere. Matt dropped a note in just to say, let me see. I was on a really old bus to Southport Flower Show a couple of weeks ago. It was an organised trip by the Isle of Man steam packet from Liverpool to Southport. There was one luxury coach and two really old coaches for passenger transport. We don't quite know, by the way, what's the state of the bus that they're ferrying people around Heysham in at the moment. Before 1 o'clock today, after Mannin Line, we're back on the 60th anniversary archive with David Conister joining Stuart Slack to take a look underneath Quarterbridge, to find out more about one of the Isle of Man's most famous landmarks. That's after Mannin Line today. And also, I need to get to the bottom of this. If you're a fisherman or fisherwoman or you're on a boat, is it true that around the Tower of Refuge, the rocks are alive with eels? It's been said to me that there are eels galore around the Tower of Refuge. Is it true? Is anybody catching them? Who's buying them? Who's serving eels on the Isle of Man?
The Sunday Chill Out.
Hi, this is Chris Pearson from the Chill Out Show. On Sunday 22nd September, we'll be marking the end of summer with a live outside broadcast from the Cafe at the Sound between 6 and 9. Why not come and join us for some fantastic sunset views over the Calf for the autumn equinox? With drinks and chilled out tunes, the night is free, but we'll be raising cash for the I'll Listen charity. The Chill Out Show live from the Cafe at the Sound from 6 on Sunday 22nd September.
Flocking to the sea.
We're until 1 o'clock today. All you need to do is call, text, email and WhatsApp. The bill is clearly not fit for purpose if contributors to your programme can hold different interpretations of the same, says 313. It's very important that we're aware of a breach in rights, says CC, as lacks insurance for any public liability to Manx Utilities meters. The big problem, if there's a problem with the hazard meters they put inside or outside your home, they are listed as hazardous, says CC, regarding, this is the smart meters, is that right? Will the hate bill apply to football touchlines protecting referees, says Mike. Mike, I appreciate that, tune I know. And that I'm not being flippant about that, because we are desperately short of referees on the Isle of Man, because some people think because they can scream and shout at the television, they can scream and shout at a referee who's refereeing maybe youth football matches or senior matches. You know, if you've been to one, you've heard it happen. Somebody, some clever so-and-so, on the touchline suddenly puts themselves up as a FIFA expert and starts telling the referee what they need to know. And Bob said, have you forgotten about the protests regarding the Sexual Assault Referral Centre? What about the protests around COVID-19? Says Grumpy Bob. So, okay, what do you mean, Bob? What at the other end of that, that's your opinion, but what does it mean for this particular bill? What does it mean when a politician tries to influence me into voting for them? Can I prosecute them for attempting to, well, who knows? Because somebody somewhere has to define what influencing is. And, you know, at the other end of influencing comes coercing. Did you feel coerced by your MHK to vote for he or she at the election last time? Any thoughts? I've got some information coming up on Eelgate, so if you can tell me if this is true, that there are eels around the Tower of Refuge, I'd love to hear from you. And also, a message in from Ian, who said, did you see that story about how we can get rid of pigeons on the Isle of Man? Certainly in Douglas, apparently they hate garlic. Pigeons despise the smell and taste of garlic, making it a very effective deterrent. All you need to do is grow garlic and the pigeons won't come anywhere near. That's what we need in Strand Street then. Big tubs full of garlic. It'll smell gorgeous. That's it. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today. Back tomorrow. Open line.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation station. This is Manx Radio.
Through the decades of its existence, Manx Radio has been able to bring listeners the knowledge of those whose passion was to research given subjects. That's why David Conister found himself underneath Quarterbridge on the outskirts of Douglas with the man who famously won bronze in cycling at the Cardiff Commonwealth Games, Stuart Slack.
Well, today we're under the bridge at Quarterbridge, which is probably as well known to people in the Isle of Man as any. How will it have got its name?
Well, it would obviously be named after one of the quarterlands. As we're actually on the Onken side of the river, and just over the other side is the Braddon side, and the river is actually the boundary between Onken and Braddon. And the parishes were divided into treens, and one of the treens of Onken parish is actually called Douglas. It extends sort of more or less along the river up as far as Bray Hill, up probably to the grandstand and then down across to the sea. And the trees were divided into, this particular one's into 3 quarterlands. There's Ballaquail, Ballabrui, Ballacameen. Well, this isn't the original bridge. The original bridge was actually further downstream, about 50 yards.
Really?
I suppose if we go right back, I found a document in the museum, 1701, where it was a dispute between Robert Fletcher, who gave his name to Balla Fletcher Estate, which is in Braddon, which you know well, because you used to live out there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Balla Fletcher on one side, and John Kirgy, which sort of became Curfey later on, who was the owner of Ballaquail. And there was a dispute, obviously it was a bit more boggy down here in those days, and there was a dispute as to actually where the river ran. And in the sort of the setting quest met to decide, and they pointed out that one of the points of the boundary was the rock where the bridge stood. Now, whether the bridge still stood there then, or whether there'd been an earlier bridge or not, I don't know.
No.
But then we go on a little bit until 1739, when the Bridge Act came into being, and bridges were sort of really brought up to date. And it listed 5 bridges that were to be sort of brought up to date, and properly built. And there was one at Ramsey, Solby Bridge, the one at Balla, just past St John's, the one at Glenfaber, and the one down by Mullinacunya, on the old Castletown Road. But the Quarterbridge was never mentioned, so I think we can assume that at that point there was already a bridge here.
Yes.
See?
Part of island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.